Roy. Okay. Roy says, "Hey, Bradley, what's going on? I have an existing client who offers me $50,000 a year for every city in which I can generate him leads for landscaping, tree service, electrician, roofing, and Christmas lights." Wow. That's a pretty damn good offer. We've been working together for almost 2 years, and he's a very good closer. He can bring money in as long as I send him leads. Now he wants to expand his business and is ready to move forward as long as the numbers make sense. I'm thinking 50,000 a year per city may sound like a good deal, but then he's looking to get leads from various trades, which may end up costing a lot to generate as well. That's true. So this profit margin may not be that much after all. Would you take up on this offer? Why or why not? And if not, how would you restructure the deal that makes sense for both sides? This is the biggest offer I've been presented yet, so I thought I'd get your opinion and advice on this. That way I can feel more confident about how I go about this. Thank you. That's a really good question. I would have to think through that one, Roy. I'm not going to be able to answer that here. However, I certainly think there's, at the top of my head, I would have to break it down and try to determine, okay, $50,000 per year per city. So let's just take one city as an example. What would that break down to on a monthly basis? And that would give me kind of a starting point as a budget. So, what is it? $4,200 a month or some shit like that is what it would be. Whatever it is, whatever it comes out to be, that would give me kind of like the starting point as to what, how much revenue can I generate from this engagement, right? And then what is it going to cost me in order to get results? And that there's a ton of variables there, right? Are you just doing straight up SEO, or are you also buying paid traffic? Like, are you doing search ads or whatever to generate leads immediately? So there's a number of things that go into it, but I would probably just start with, okay, $50,000 per year. I would probably take an average city, not something that's uber competitive, but an average city for what he wants to target. And I don't know what that is, but I would, try to determine what that is, ask him, etc. And then I would go through and start with that. Okay, well, this is what essentially my maximum revenue per month is going to be for this location. What can I use? How can I distribute, or how can I utilize that budget in order to get results and still allow for a margin? And then try to, that's what I would do, is try to determine that first. And if you know your costs, like for example, in SEO, I know what it costs me to have things built and developed, et cetera. So I can come up with the number of what it's going to cost in assets and like developing the assets to accomplish this. But the 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 ongoing costs, like link building and things like that, that's a bit more vague, right? That's not quite as concrete or cut and dry, so to speak, right? So those are kind of variables that, you're going to have some fudge factors built into those projections, if that makes sense. Because and again, but if you have a very specific set of services that you're targeting, over time you can determine what your costs are, because as you repeat it and you become more efficient and all that, you can dial those costs in, and it becomes much more predictable for subsequent locations that you enter, if that's clear. Initially, you're probably, again, guys, just to be clear, with an offer like that, I would start with what I said, to figure out what my budget is on a monthly basis, and then figure out what the breakdown for my costs are and everything else. But I would also keep in mind that, up front, I may end up breaking even, or even in some cases, some of you might think I'm crazy about this, but in some cases, I will actually lose money on a campaign initially, to produce results for a client, because I know that it's going to turn, well, I hope that it's going to turn into a longer term engagement that becomes very profitable. And there are some cases where I will do that, seriously, where I'll take money from a client for SEO, but I'll take that retainer money and put it into Google Ads, as well as some of my own money, just to generate some leads while I'm getting the SEOs. I know that's not a great business. That's not something that I recommend to do, but sometimes I'll take a little bit of a risk because I expect a bigger payoff down the road. I'm not saying that you do that. I'm just saying that that might be something that I would be willing to do. And it might be, you know what I'm saying? Like, initially, you're going to spend more, but as you get better at developing assets and figuring out what works, maybe dialing in campaigns, ad campaigns, et cetera, the costs will come down, which means your margins increase, right? And that's the whole point. If you really dialed this in and had a good system that was duplicatable, then it's about scaling to the moon, right? And so that's something, again, it's an interesting offer. It's an interesting idea. you're right. That's a lot to be doing. I would probably try to focus in on something a little bit more specific to start with. But I certainly think it could be done. It's just a matter of kind of breaking down all the costs and making sure that you are at least at break even point initially, with the hopes, and in my opinion, with the hopes that, down the road. And again, I'm not saying that you can't come out of the gate being profitable. I'm just saying, $4,200 a month to kind of optimize in a city for all of these services, that's not going to last long, right? You're going to burn through that budget fairly quickly, at least initially, in my opinion. But again, I'm not saying it can't be done, but it would take a lot more thought than just the short answer I gave you here. So interesting offer, but certainly break it down. Start with, like I said, on a monthly basis. That's typically how I do things. I try to plan things out on a monthly basis, not on an annual basis. Just makes it easier to manage, in my opinion. So interesting concept, though. So follow-up question, or is that okay? Sorry to Bradley. Hey, Bradley, to follow on my previous question on my existing client offering $50,000 per city per year to generate leads for him. Here is some more info. Oh, Jesus, maybe I should have read that. To see the situation clear, the cities my client is looking to get into have a population of 260, 200K, 1.3 million, and 1 million respectively. Would this change how you approach the situation? Thank you so much. Yeah, absolutely it would. Because like the 260K and 200K, those are, 25, that's a quarter or even a fifth of the size of the other cities. So you $50,000 a year for those. Again, I'm not saying that you'd absolutely be profitable with that. You likely would be, but that same $50,000 to target a 1 million to 1.3 million city that's a big difference, right? It's a huge difference because the competition levels are significantly higher in the 1 to 1.3 million cities than it would be the 200 to 260K cities. That's why I was saying you have to kind of figure out what your like median is, or what is an average or typical city, if it can be done, and then base your costs around that, and then just recognize that there are going to be times where you have. So let's just use this as an example. Let's just say that the average city was 600K in population. Then you would know that, okay, well, if your average is that and you base your projections and your costs, et cetera, at that, then when you get these locations that are 1/3 the size of your average, now you can assume that you ought to be able to get somewhere near 3 times the margin, right? If it's 1/3 the size. Now it's not an exact science. It likely wouldn't be that, but you ought to have certainly a much higher margin than you would from the typical situation. But at the same time, on the other side of that spectrum is if it's twice as populated or as competitive as the typical location or typical city, then your margins are going to increase, or decrease drastically. So you have to take that into consideration. And perhaps you would have like a range. Anything between 200 to 500K is one value per year. Anything between 500K and a million is another value per year. Or what I should say, sorry, 0 to 500K is one value per year. 500K to a million is another value per year. And 1.5 or something like that, which are big cities, is a different value. That might be something that I would work out. But again, start with a median. Like, what is the average? And develop your costs on that first, your projections on that first. And then you can always negotiate for terms for what I just described. And that might be one way to do it. I'm not saying that's the only way to do it. That's just one avenue to explore, is what I'm saying. Hopefully that's clear. Interesting questions, Roy. It's an interesting offer too. I hope you can work that out somehow. I'd certainly spend some time trying to figure out how to make that work, because it seems like an offer that could be very, very lucrative. But again, you're right to be wary and to ask these kind of questions up front, because I know those numbers seem big, but when you start to break things down, again, especially targeting a 1.3 million city, that's not a lot of money. That's really not, especially across multiple industries. Because I know, I swear to God, I know some of my link building clients, like in the personal injury space, for one client location in one city, they get, $8,000 a month in SEO retainer money, right? Think about that. That's $100,000 a year for one city, for one business, in one location, that they're paying. So you can imagine $50,000 per year per city for multiple industries, trying to generate leads for multiple services, tree services, landscaping, Christmas lights, etc. that that's not a lot of money, $4,200 a month, especially in larger cities. So again, you got to kind of work that out. Pretty interesting though.